So the first book that I read for July is called Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits is written by James Clear, and it's basically act like as a guide for people who wants to have a more structured and disciplined life. By the simple step of following and keeping track and staying disciplined and staying consistent with the little steps. I think the idea and the concept that this book gripped onto throughout the book was quite interesting. It talked about how a lot of great things that you can achieve can be achieved if you build up all of these small habits all together. And in essence, what it's trying to emphasize is that small achievements lead up to great things. And ultimately, this book also talked about how to be a better person by a small percentage every day, and how all of these small percentage can build up to make you a better person at the end of the year or at the end of a designated period that you have set for yourself. And it's not only about doing things consistently every day, because you will get tired of that, but it's about creating a system that you can follow in order for you to be able to reach whatever that you want to have. There's also this saying that goes throughout the book over and over again. It talked about how you don't rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the something of your system. Let me find the quote here and put it here. Some of the things that were talked about over and over in the book was how small atomic improvements can lead to significant, incredible results, and how you should apply this fact in achieving what you want to have in life. You should focus less on establishing goals and achieving goals, but you should focus more on creating a system that you can follow for you to achieve what you want. You have to establish your personality and your sense of identity by what you are doing consistently and what you are doing your entire life. And the next thing that the author talked about is, in order to make a significant change in your life, you have to establish a dramatic change in the environment in order for you to be able to make these changes obvious. They also talk about how you can use social dynamics to make changes attractive, and they also talk about how you have to enable consistency to make easier changes, and use the reward system so that you can make whatever changes that you are doing to be more satisfying. Okay, so I gave this book 3.5 stars, but I think that everyone should read this book at least once in their life. And I actually gave this book a bonus point for being really simple, really easy to read, really concise, and really straight to the point. So it's really short. You can listen to this book on audiobook, or you can read it. Either way, this book is really fast. It's really fast paced. You can finish it in one sitting, and you will totally enjoy it as much as I did. But the thing that I found quite bland about this book is that it didn't really go beyond what I expected it to be. There weren't really a lot of insights put into these advices. However, I must say that the books are quite short, and it does go straight to the point, so plus point for that. And I also really appreciate that the whole premise of this book isn't really about fancy writing. It isn't about fancy storytelling. It's all about giving you direct tips on how you can use this how you can utilize these small habits in order to help you achieve your goals. And I think that's really excellent, because a lot of the times self-help books really spend a lot of time turning around in the corners, not going straight to the point. But this book does an excellent job at conveying an important message in a simple and concise way. And I learned a lot from this book as well. I actually created a little sticky note of things that I learned from this book that I found really helpful. A lot of people made similar notes as well, but a lot of the things that were included in the notes weren't really relevant to me, because I think that it's quite repetitive. But the things that I put in my notes were really useful for me, and I think I could use a lot of the tips from this book in my personal life. I consumed this book via audiobook. I didn't really read the book. I read it via audiobook. I listened to it, and it's quite interesting. The way that the narrator talks about the book is really interesting, and I think that it lost the number one star because it's not really as unique, but I think it's a lot better than many self-help books that I read this year. Talking about self-help books, the next book that I read this year is Algorithm Way of Life. It's written by Brian Christian and Tim Griffin. If I'm not mistaken, I have to check back who wrote the book. But anyway, this book is about implementing computer science theory into your daily life, but it's not written in your face way, like computer science say do this. So an analogy to that is you have to do this in order to implement this theory in your life. It doesn't do that. It only describes the philosophy. It only describes the computer science theory in a really philosophy way without dumbing it down for the general audience. Like, I personally am a computer science major, and I think that this book isn't dumbed down to the general audience. Like, people like me could still enjoy this book genuinely, despite being familiar with the concepts that are talking the book in a philosophical way that encourages you to look at things in life differently. It sort of just describes things. Vaguely, but also at the same time specifically in the computer science manner, and then it slightly translate on how you can apply these things in your own life. And I read quite a lot of fiction this month. If you don't know yet, I read quite a lot of fiction. Like, my reading for each month mostly comprises of fiction. So the first fiction that I read this month was The Kite Runner, written by Khaled Hosseini. Actually, I picked this book up because Chad Sadiq recommended it. The Kite Runner, for me, I'm not sure, I haven't read the synopsis yet. In fact, I actually went to the book without reading the synopsis at all. When I first heard about the book from when Chad Sadiq first mentioned it, I was like, I didn't know that it was actually about war. I was assuming it to be something about fantasy because it kind of sounds like the Maze Runner. I know this book. I just happened to know after I finished this book, and I was making some research about it to see what people have to say about this book. I just love this book so much. I can't move on from the book so fast. So I just did some Google searches on this book, and I found out that this book was apparently book that people study for their SAT English or their AP Literature. I'm not sure, either one of those. Yeah, so I was really surprised. I didn't know that people study this book. Yeah, so when I first heard the book, I thought it was a fantasy book or something. So yeah, I went into the book without any expectation at all. But the first 10 pages or so, like the first chapter or the first prologue of the book, really got me so hooked into the book. Like, I was so attracted. I was dying to know more, that I actually finished the book in like 3 days. It was really interesting to read, and the book was actually written so simply, so delicately, but yet it doesn't take away any beautiful element from this book. I love the quotes that this book used. I love the way that the book described the simplest thing. I love how this book portrayed innocent friendship between the main character, who happens to be this privileged rich guy, and the other character, who happens to be this privileged rich guy's servant. They had a really cute and emotional. Anyway, I kept talking about how really telling you about the synopsis of the book. Anyway, this book was about the pre-war situation in Afghanistan and what happened during the war and what happened after the war. But it was told from the perspective of this boy who happened to be born and raised in Kabul, Afghanistan, the capital city of Afghanistan, and he happens to be this rich privileged boy. And this book narrates the friendship between this main character and the side character, who are from two dramatically different casts. This book has a lot of plot twists, has a lot of unexpected turns of events, and this book also talks about the devastating aftermath and devastating situation of war. But then the main character moved to the States, and then he moved back from the States to like see what happened to his country. And yeah, things happened along the way. This is more like a coming of age story for me, because it talks about how the boy grew from a really selfish person, but not really selfish. Okay, he was a kid. It's normal for kids to act that way, but it talks about his character development from he was a child to his adulthood. Really interesting. You should read that. The book talks about war, the aftermath of war, and how war in general impacts people from different walks of life. Some people, a country could just be a place to live in, but for some other people, their country is their own pride. So seeing your country being left in a devastating way, it's really traumatizing. It's really devastating to a point that many people lost their sense of identity after the war. But that's not the only main theme of the book. Actually, the recurring theme throughout the book is about friendship and loyalty that was shown by the side character of this book, who happens to be the main character's best friend. He is shown to have this genuine sense of loyalty to his friend, which is the main character. He's also just genuinely nice to everyone. Like, he doesn't hold grudges despite how people treated him badly. And the side character who depicted as loyal and the best friend of the main character is also part of the minority, that's which is why he was discriminated against really terribly. It's an eye-opening experience. I think that a lot of people should read this book and educate themselves regarding the danger of discrimination, the danger of not treating a human being as a human being. So this book, despite being a fictional book, was actually written from the inspiration of a real-life situation, of a real-life war. So it left quite a significant amount of emotional impact, I would say. This is because the author really uses quite a significantly vivid description of the war, throughout the war, before the war, and after the war. So it really evokes such an emotion inside of me that relates to the war that the people in the book are struggling with. I gave The Kite Runner a total of 4.5 stars. I like the book. I like the way it was written. I like the characters. I like the setting. I like the depth that the author touched in order to make the story work. I think that the narration throughout the entire book is being a coming of age story is quite interesting, even though I don't enjoy coming of age story. The next book that I read this for the month of July is 1,000 Splendid Sun, also recommended by Shed Siddiq and also written by the same author, Khaled Hosseini. So this book is about, so the previous book, The Kite Runner, is about father-son relationship, even though I never mentioned about the father. Sorry, but I'm so sorry. I'm such a bad reviewer. I will improve the picture, I promise. Okay, so yeah, the previous book, The Kite Runner, talked about father and son relationship, but this book talked more about mother and daughter relationship, and it's really interesting because the two characters from A Thousand Splendid Sun was again from drastically different backgrounds, but their life collided, their path intertwined when the second character happens to share the same fate as the first character. So the first character, Mariam, is an illegitimate child of a wealthy business owner in Herat. I think that place was called Herat. She was born there. But then tragic thing happened to this first character that she was born. This is a spoiler. But yeah, Rashid is a abusive, manipulating guy, and he is much older than Mariam, but he was forced to marry him anyway because Mariam has nobody to take care of her now that her mom died. So yeah, that was when Mariam's story began. And then there's this second character. Her name is Laila. She's the daughter of this school teacher, and she happens to be living a better life than Mariam, and she went to school. Mariam didn't. She didn't went to school. Lala went to school, and she has this really big ambition because she was motivated by her father, who happens to be this caring and doesn't show any sign of misogyny. At that time, Afghanistan was like filled with misogynist men who think that they're entitled to have their wife devote their entire life to them. But Lala's father is different. He wants the best for his daughter. He wants his daughter to pursue education. He wants his daughter to be someone important, to have a place in the government, to have contribution to the society. Yeah, that was what Lala's father had for her, which is so contrasting to Mariam, because while Mariam has a father, Jalil, who cared about her, but it was so obvious that he didn't care that much because he sent her to this forced marriage, to this arranged marriage with a significantly older guy anyway. But then all these things happened before the war. Now after the war strike, Afghanistan was never the same again, and all of the people there who are living in Afghanistan have to go through such a tragic life, including the main character, Mariam and Laila. Like, Mariam had a really terrible life on its own, but then the war made it even worse for her. And so did Laila. Like, Laila had this promising future ahead of her, but this war struck, and for decades her life was never the same again. So after this tragic thing happened, Lila was also forced to be in an arranged marriage, and that's when Lila's life and Maria's life and their path intertwined, and that's when we see the relationship between the two bloom. The recurring thing in this book was about the discrimination that women have to go through during the war and during their stay in a place that really discriminated heavily against women. Like, these women have to endure so much. Aside from the terrible things that happened throughout the war, like how sexist and misogynist the Taliban was, the warlords, that is the right word, and they also happen to have to face the abuse, the domestic abuse in their own household, and how they have to face the sexism from their own families. So it really portrayed how hard it is being a woman during the time of political conflict. And this book is actually an effort by the author to humanize the women that he saw in niqab. He wants to tell a story that, you know, these women in niqab is also a human being, is also a woman, is also a mother, is also a sister, is also a daughter. So I think it's an interesting approach, and I think that a lot of the scenes that are depicted in the book is so raw, is so emotional, that I had to put the book down in order to process my thoughts. It was just so thought-provoking. So yeah, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. And if you want to see an in-depth review of this book, I will be making a video dedicated to me talking about books that Shazadika have recommended. So if you want to see me talk about this book, subscribe so that you will know when I upload that video. Bye. Thank you for watching.